the children at the door. I never liked that house. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still picture the narrow walls and the way that would seem to lean inward with age, as though the whole structure wanted to collapse into itself and bury me alive. It was a rental, nothing special, an old single-story place on the outskirts of Abilene, Texas, where the night seemed to stretch on forever and the silence carried its own weight. I lived there for less than a year, and yet it marked me in a way no other place ever has. The neighborhood was quiet to the point of suffocation. Most of the houses nearby were either abandoned or occupied by people who kept their curtains shut tight and their eyes even tighter. At night, I would often step outside just to breathe something other than the stale air of my living room. The street lamps were few and far between, leaving most of the road swallowed in darkness, broken only by the faint glow of porch lights that flickered reluctantly against the black. It was on one of those nights when the air felt heavier than usual, that it happened. I remember sitting in the living room, the TV turned down low to fill the silence with a meaningless murmur. The only other light came from the lamp in the corner, its weak bulb struggling against the shadows that clung to the edges of the room. The smell of old wood and dust never seemed to leave that house. It lingered in the carpets, in the faded curtains, even in my clothes. That's when I heard it. A knock. It wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate tapping against the glass of the front window. It was enough to freeze me in place, the remote still in my hand, my body straining to catch the sound again. Another knock followed. Slow, even, too deliberate to be the wind or a loose branch. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing, but there was something in the rhythm that carried an intelligence behind it, something patient, something that knew I was listening. I turned down the volume on the TV until the only sound in the room was my own breathing. Then, as if in answer, there came a third knock, slightly louder, still measured. When I stood, my legs felt unsteady, like I was moving against the pull of deep water. I told myself not to look, not to get too close, but curiosity dragged me forward. The window was covered by a set of thin curtains, faded yellow from years of sun. I inched closer, and the closer I got, the colder the air around me felt, as though the room itself was resisting my movement. My fingertips brushed the fabric, and I froze again. I didn't want to pull it back. Something inside me, something primal and wordless, told me not to. But I did. And I saw them. Two children stood on the porch. A boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, dressed in clothing that seemed out of place. Their coats were too thin for the chill in the air, their shoes scuffed and old. They stood unnaturally still, their heads tilted slightly downward, their faces shadowed by the porch light above them. For a moment, I felt something like relief. Just kids. But that relief died quickly, smothered by something else, something wrong. The boy slowly raised his head, and that's when I saw them. His eyes. Black. Not just dark, not just shadowed. Black. Completely, entirely, impossibly black, as though the sockets themselves were voids, endless and depthless. The girl lifted her head too, and hers were the same. Black holes where I should have been. I stumbled backward, my hand still gripping the curtain, as if I could somehow erase what I had seen by letting the fabric fall back into place. But before it closed, I saw the boy's mouth begin to move. He wasn't speaking, not in any way that matched his lips. The movements were too slow, too disconnected from the sound that came next. It wasn't words, not really. It was something like a whisper, but not soft, louder, insistent, crawling against the walls of the house and seeping into my skull. It felt like pressure, like the sound of static from an old radio turned up too high. I couldn't make sense of it, but I knew what it wanted. Let us in. The thought wasn't my own. It burrowed into me like a parasite, forcing itself against my resistance. My skin prickled, my throat tightened, and suddenly the air felt too thick to breathe. I backed away, further and further, until the curtain fell fully shut. But the knocking began again. This time it wasn't slow. It was frantic. The sound rattled against the glass, sharp and urgent, filling the room with its insistence. The lamp flickered in the corner, and for a moment the room plunged into darkness before struggling back to light. My body moved on instinct, rushing to the hallway, then to the back room, then anywhere that wasn't near that window. But no matter where I went, I heard them. The knocking, the whispering that wasn't words but carried meaning all the same. The pressure growing heavier and heavier inside my head, a suffocating weight that told me to give in, to open the door, to let them inside. I pressed my back against the bedroom wall, staring at the crack of light beneath the door as though it might betray me. My pulse thundered in my ears, and every breath came shallow, desperate. Then it stopped. The knocking, the whispering, all of it. Silence spread through the house, thick and unnatural. For a long time, I didn't move. I couldn't. When I finally found the courage to step out of the room, the house felt colder than before. The air carried the faintest trace of something sharp, metallic, like blood left too long in the open. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even close my eyes. The next morning, when the light finally pushed its way through the curtains, I dared to check the porch. There were no children, but there were marks on the glass. Small smudges like fingerprints pressed hard against it. 10 of them, perfectly aligned, each one smeared slightly downward, as though whoever had left them was trying to claw their way inside. I moved out of that house a month later, but I still wake sometimes in the middle of the night, heart pounding, ears straining against the silence. Because silence is never just silence anymore. Not after them. And sometimes, when the night grows heavy and the air feels wrong, I swear I can still hear it. That knock. Soft at first, then louder. Always patient. Always waiting. The children at the door. Beneath the river's smile. I used to think rivers were comforting. Growing up near the water, I would sit by the banks for hours, listening to the steady rush, the lull of current that never seemed to end. It was predictable, reliable, a rhythm that belonged to the earth itself. But after what happened in the Midwest that autumn, I can't look at rivers the same way. I lived in a small college town back then, a quiet place in Wisconsin where the days felt slow and the nights slower. Students filled the bars every weekend, chasing the warmth of liquor in the crisp bite of fall air. The streets emptied quickly once the sun went down, and the town seemed to fold in on itself, swallowed by the vast silence of farmland and forest pressing in from every direction. The river cut through the heart of it, dark and restless, the kind of water that looked black at night no matter how many streetlights lined the bridges above it. It was October when the first student disappeared. People said he had been drinking, that he had wandered too close to the edge of the river, that it was tragic but not unusual. The police found his body a week later, snagged on a fallen branch miles downstream. His face was bloated, his clothes shredded by the current. By the time the second and third vanished, no one wanted to admit there was a pattern. I remember posters plastered across telephone poles, grainy photographs of smiling faces that would never smile again. The whispers spread quickly. Drunk students stumbling into the water, a killer hiding in the dark, a curse clinging to the banks of that river. I told myself it was none of my concern. I was careful. I didn't drink much, I didn't walk alone at night. But fear doesn't respect caution, and neither do rivers. The night it happened, I had stayed late at a friend's apartment on the far side of town. I wasn't drunk, only tired, and the thought of walking home across the bridge filled me with a strange unease I couldn't explain. The air was heavy with mist, the kind that clung to your skin and made every breath taste faintly of metal. The streetlights buzzed overhead, their glow fractured in the wet haze. When I reached the bridge, the sound of the water rose to meet me. A low, constant rush, like a whisper just below hearing. I gripped the railing as I crossed, feeling the cold metal seep into my palms. Halfway across, I stopped. I don't know why. Something pulled at me, subtle but insistent. My eyes drifted downward, to the surface of the river far below. It was too dark to see clearly, but the ripples caught the light in strange, shifting patterns. For a moment, I thought I saw something beneath it, a shape pale and long, sliding just out of sight. I leaned closer. The water looked as though it was smiling. Not a trick of the current, not just waves catching the light. The surface curved in a way that suggested teeth. The mist thickened around me, and the world shrank to the sound of the river and the pounding of my heart. My breath came fast, visible in the damp air. And then, faint but unmistakable, I heard it. Knocking. It was soft at first, like fingertips tapping on glass. But there was no glass, just the water moving below. The sound seemed to rise from beneath the surface, muffled, deliberate, like someone trapped beneath the river was trying to get out. I couldn't move. My legs locked in place, and my grip on the railing tightened until my knuckles ached. The knocking grew louder, faster, filling the air with its rhythm. Then came the whisper. It wasn't a voice, not really. It was more like static, the hiss of something old and broken forcing its way into my ears. But the meaning was clear. Down here. I tore my eyes away, but the pull was unbearable. My body leaned forward against my will, my chest pressing into the cold metal, my face lowering closer to the black surface below. The smile widened, ripples stretching across the water in unnatural arcs. And then I saw them. Faces. Dozens of them, pale and distorted, floating just beneath the surface. Their eyes were empty sockets, their mouths twisted into grins that mirrored the curve of the river itself. Some of them I recognized from the posters. The missing students, their expressions grotesquely frozen in joyless smiles. Their lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear but felt deep inside me, gnawing at my thoughts. Come down. The railing trembled beneath my grip. My body leaned further, one foot lifting as though to climb over. My chest filled with a pressure so strong I thought my ribs would crack. The mist swirled tighter, cloaking the world around me until there was nothing but me, the bridge, and the river smiling beneath. A sudden gust of wind broke through, sharp and cold, cutting into my skin. It was enough to snap the trance, enough to force me back onto my heels, away from the edge. The moment I pulled back, the knocking stopped. The faces dissolved into ripples. The smile vanished. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my apartment, slamming the door behind me and collapsing onto the floor. My hands still smelled of the river, a faint scent of rot and silt that clung no matter how many times I washed them. The next morning, they pulled another body from the water. A classmate, someone I had seen just days before, alive and laughing. They said he must have stumbled in after a night of drinking. But I knew better. The river takes what it wants. It waits, patient and smiling, pulling people closer with whispers only they can hear. It hides its hunger beneath ripples and mist, feeding on those foolish enough to stand too close. Sometimes late at night, when I lie awake in the silence of my room, I still hear it. Knocking. Soft, deliberate, from beneath the floorboards. And I wonder if the river ever really let me go, or if it's still waiting, smiling beneath the surface, biding its time until I answer the call.